My wife ended my sister's relationship in 3 minutes, and it was beautiful. The nuclear explosion that shattered my family forever began on a quiet Sunday afternoon when my sister's toxic boyfriend decided to mock my wife's grief over her best friend's tragic death. What followed was the most brutal verbal destruction I've ever witnessed, delivered with surgical precision that left everyone at the dinner table speechless and ultimately divided our entire family into warring factions that may never reconcile again. I'm 34 years old and married to the love of my life, Isabella, who I met when we were both 17 during our senior year of high school. She was confident and openly gay while I was still struggling with my sexuality in the closet, so we maintained a close friendship for years before I finally came out at 22 and we began dating seriously. We got married in 2018 and adopted our 4-year-old son Marcus after his birth mother died unexpectedly, leaving him orphaned with no family members able to provide the care and stability he desperately needed. My younger sister Carmen, who's 29, has been dating Derek for nearly a decade, and our entire extended family has despised him from the moment she first brought him home. Derek is the embodiment of toxic masculinity disguised as brutal honesty, the kind of man who tells servers their hair looks stupid and then gets offended when they don't thank him for his feedback. At my cousin's wedding last year, he loudly announced that the bride's dress made her look fat, then spent the reception sulking because people were avoiding him instead of appreciating his authentic observations. During my nephew's birthday party, Derek informed my 8-year-old niece that her drawing was terrible and she should try harder if she wanted people to actually like her artwork. When my brother-in-law asked him to stop criticizing a child's creativity, Derek threw a 20-minute tantrum about how everyone was too sensitive and couldn't handle honest feedback from someone who actually understood art. The irony is that Derek works in data entry and has never created anything more artistic than a spreadsheet in his entire life. What makes Derek particularly insufferable is his complete inability to handle even the mildest criticism about his own behavior or choices. Last Christmas, when my father mentioned that Derek's constant interrupting was making it difficult for others to share stories, Derek locked himself in the bathroom for an hour and refused to come out until Carmen apologized to him for not defending his communication style. He regularly dishes out harsh judgments about everyone else's lives while becoming visibly distraught if anyone suggests his own decisions might be questionable. The tragedy that would eventually lead to Derek's complete destruction began 2 years ago when Marcus's birth mother, Sophia, died suddenly in her sleep from an undiagnosed heart condition at just 31 years old. She was Isabella's closest friend since childhood, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthdays, brought soup when you were sick, and somehow always knew exactly what to say during difficult times. Isabella had been Sophia's labor coach, Marcus's godmother, and the person Sophia trusted most in the world to raise her son if anything ever happened to her. The morning Sophia died, Isabella discovered Marcus crying in his crib while his mother lay peacefully dead in the next room, having passed away sometime during the night. The trauma of finding her best friend's body while Marcus screamed for his mother has left Isabella with lasting grief that she's been processing through therapy and counseling. The anniversary of Sophia's death is particularly difficult, requiring extra emotional support and understanding from our family. This year's anniversary fell on a Saturday, so we visited Sophia's grave together, bringing fresh flowers and spending time talking to Marcus about his birth mother in ways that help him maintain a connection to her memory. Isabella was quieter than usual afterward, which is completely normal, and my father suggested they take a walk around the neighborhood during our Sunday family gathering to give her space to process her emotions privately. Derek immediately became agitated by their absence, repeatedly asking why they'd left and why he wasn't invited to join their conversation. When I explained that Isabella was struggling with Sophia's death anniversary and needed some quiet time with my father, Derek rolled his eyes and declared, "She should be over that by now. It's been 2 years. How long is she going to milk this dead woman thing for attention?" My grandfather, who rarely speaks up during family conflicts, immediately defended Isabella's right to grieve at her own pace. He shared that he'd lost his best friend over 20 years ago and still had difficult moments, explaining that grief doesn't follow convenient timelines. "You don't just get over losing someone important," he told Derek firmly. "Maybe you'd understand that if you had any real friendships yourself." When Isabella and my father returned from their walk, she seemed more centered and was able to engage normally in conversations during lunch. Everything was peaceful until Derek decided to force his way into Isabella's discussion with my grandfather about weekend plans for the Christmas markets. When they politely continued their conversation without including him, Derek's narcissistic rage reached its boiling point. "This is complete bullshit," he suddenly shouted, silencing every conversation around the table. "She's hogging all the attention because her friend died 3 years ago. Get over it already. We're all sick of hearing about this dead bitch and pretending Isabella's grief performance is anything more than manipulation for sympathy." The silence that followed was deafening. I expected Isabella to break down or explode with righteous anger. Instead, she set down her fork with deadly calm and looked directly at Derek with an expression I'd never seen before, cold and calculating in a way that made everyone lean back slightly. "Actually," she said in a voice so controlled it was frightening, "my grandfather and I weren't discussing Sophia. We were planning his visit to the Christmas markets next weekend. But since you want to be a malicious piece of shit, let me give you exactly what you're asking for." What happened next was the most systematic verbal annihilation I've ever witnessed. Isabella didn't raise her voice or use profanity. She simply began stating facts about Derek's life and relationships with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. "Everyone at this table genuinely despises you," she began, her tone conversational but deadly. "We've all discussed it separately. When you don't show up to family events, we literally celebrate. The conversation is better, the atmosphere is lighter, and we can actually enjoy each other's company without walking on eggshells around your constant need to prove you're the smartest person in any room." Derek's face went through rapid color changes, But Isabella wasn't finished. You want to know what brutal honesty looks like? You have zero real friends because you're fundamentally unlikable as a human being. Your own siblings avoid you during holidays. Your co-workers think you're insufferable, which is why you've never been promoted despite working the same dead-end job for 6 years. You contribute nothing positive to any situation you're part of. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the killing blow. Sophia lived 31 years and made more positive impact on this world than you ever will, even if you somehow managed to live to be 90. Her funeral was packed with people whose lives she'd touched through genuine kindness and generosity. Meanwhile, you'd be lucky if anyone besides Carmen bothered attending your funeral, and honestly, she'd probably feel relieved to finally be free from your emotional vampirism. The accuracy was devastating. Derek sat there with his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, unable to form any response because every word Isabella had spoken was undeniably true. Nobody rushed to defend him or suggest she was being too harsh because we'd all been thinking these things for years. Isabella stood up calmly, smoothed her dress, and walked to the backyard while the rest of us processed what had just happened. My father broke the stunned silence by quietly asking Carmen and Derek to leave, explaining that Derek's attack on Isabella's grief had crossed an unforgivable line. When we joined Isabella outside, she immediately apologized for creating a scene. To my amazement, everyone except my mother told her she'd been completely right and that someone should have said those things to Derek years ago. My father even joked that it was perfect for a lesbian to be the one who finally told Derek straight, which actually made Isabella laugh for the first time that day. The aftermath has created a family civil war that's still raging 3 weeks later. Carmen called the next day demanding Isabella apologize for her unprovoked attack on Derek's character, threatening they wouldn't come to Christmas if Isabella didn't publicly admit she was wrong. I reminded her we were spending Christmas with Isabella's mother anyway, so her threats were meaningless. But she escalated by insisting Isabella make a public apology to the entire extended family and admit she'd been lying about everyone's feelings toward Derek. My father fully supported Isabella and asked if we could host additional family members for Christmas since he and my grandfather were done tolerating Derek's presence. My mother, however, is devastated by the family split and keeps pressuring Isabella to apologize just to restore peace, even though she privately agrees Derek deserved everything Isabella said. The breaking point came during our town's Christmas festival when Marcus told my mother he was happy Uncle Derek wasn't there because Derek was a bad man who says mean things. When she tried to defend Derek, Marcus argued back with 4-year-old logic, explaining that his teacher had told them people who consistently hurt others with words are bullies and bullies are bad people. This innocent observation finally broke through my mother's resistance. She realized that if even Marcus could recognize Derek's toxicity, perhaps the adults calling out his behavior had been right all along. She decided to join us at Isabella's mother's house for Christmas rather than enduring Derek's inevitable holiday mood swings and cruel comments. When my mother informed Carmen of her decision, Carmen completely lost control and launched into a tirade that included homophobic slurs directed at Isabella and me, followed by calling Marcus the bastard son of a dead whore. That unforgivable attack on our son and Isabella's deceased friend crossed every possible line and revealed the true depth of Carmen's toxicity when her manipulation tactics failed. I immediately ended the call and blocked Carmen everywhere, making it clear she'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. My maternal grandmother, who'd spent decades maintaining family peace, called Carmen to inform her she was dead to the family because she wouldn't tolerate bigotry or attacks on children from anyone. Derek's attempt to defend Carmen's slurs by claiming she was just angry only reinforced everyone's understanding that they're both fundamentally toxic people who feed off each other's cruelty. My father told Carmen he's disgusted, but will be there if she leaves Derek and seeks help. Until then, he's written her off completely. The irony is perfect. Derek's attempt to mock Isabella's grief and demand attention resulted in his complete isolation from our family and exposure of both his and Carmen's true characters. Isabella's systematic destruction of Derek's self-image wasn't emotional. It was calculated honesty delivered with the same brutal directness he claimed to value. As we prepare for Christmas without them, I'm struck by how much lighter our family atmosphere has become without constantly managing Derek's volatility and Carmen's enabling. Marcus will be surrounded by people who actually love each other rather than those who use family gatherings to inflict emotional damage for entertainment. Derek got exactly what he asked for: honest feedback about his place in our family. Isabella simply gave him the truth he claimed to value, delivered with the same directness he'd been using on others for years. The difference is that Isabella's honesty was accurate and justified, while Derek's honesty was just cruelty disguised as authenticity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling toxic behavior and set boundaries that protect people who deserve your emotional investment. Derek and Carmen chose their path through years of cruel choices. We've chosen ours through honest communication and mutual respect. And we're all better off for finally accepting that some relationships can't be saved and shouldn't be preserved at everyone else's expense. The woman who systematically dismantled Derek's entire existence in 3 minutes of controlled fury didn't destroy our family. She revealed its true structure by removing the people who were poisoning it from within. And honestly, we should have let her do it years ago. That was today's story. Pretty crazy, right? I'd love to hear whose side you're on, so drop your thoughts below. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. There's plenty more coming.